Hi, I'm Drew, and I'm an amateur model builder. I'm building a layout in my basement called the White River Line, inspired by the Frisco Railroad in the Ozarks. In my last episode, even though I didn't get quite all the track work done I'd hoped to in the industrial section of my railroad, I'm going to go ahead and switch gears and actually start building the switches for the ladder on my rail yard. Now, I'm going to be building these all as one piece, and I'm going to be building them without templates. So this might be the most intimidating work that I've done so far on this railroad. I've already been doing a little bit of practice on just building a simple switch without a template, but having to build like 6 of them all in one, I'm a little bit scared. But let's go ahead and jump on into it. I'm going to be building these switches on Homasote. Homasote is a fiberboard often used as a sound barrier. First, I drew out the center lines for the track using a yardstick and this switch template I made a while back. You can find more details about this in the video link in the upper right hand corner. Next, I cut out a number of fast track templates and glued them down to the Homasote using the center lines as a guide. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail about the anatomy and the construction of a switch in this video. If you watch my previous video on hand building switches, you can find more details there. But also, Fast Tracks has several videos that are way better than any tutorial I could provide. These 2 switches at the bottom of the ladder are going to be a little bit tricky, and I had to trim the templates for this left-hand switch to get these lined up right. Next, I need to add 50 plus PC board ties on the template. The rails will be soldered to these ties, so they will provide the primary support for the construction of the switches. I'm using some medium micro-engineering spikes to attach the ties to the Homasote. Normally I use small ties to attach my rails, but these medium spikes will give me a little more security for this application. Again, the two switches here on the bottom are a little bit tricky. The straight route of the right-hand switch connects to the diverging route of a left-hand switch, and the ties are at different angles. So, I played around a bit with the tie placement to get this figured out. I've got a few extra long PC board ties left over from my double crossover build, and these should work well here. Once the ties are laid down, I'm ready to start building in earnest. I've been getting some advice from Thomas over at Split Rock Mining Company. You can find a link to his channel in the upper right-hand corner of the video and down in the description. Thomas says start with the frog points and build from the inside out. Everything obeys the frog. This frog, and well, all the frogs in this build have one short leg and one long leg. The long leg becomes a stock rail for the next switch in the ladder. I used a Fast Track's point forming tool to file the angle for these frogs. Next, I need to shape the long leg to match the curve in the diverging route. I use my rail bender to do this. The geometry of this rail has a small section of straight track coming out at an angle just past the switch point, then a bit of radius curve leading up to the frog point, then another section of straight track leading out of the switch. Despite using my rail bender and trying to be as precise as possible, I still need to make some adjustments. With this rail in approximately the correct shape, I soldered the point together using a Fast Track's frog helper. Now I need to mark and file the base of the rail at the switch point for the next switch in the ladder. I use the Fast Track Stockade tool for this. The Stockade tool just barely fits in the angle of the frog. Actually, it does stretch out the angle a bit, but I soldered a nice solid frog, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm still trying to figure out the best order of operations for soldering these rails, and once I get that figured out I'll let you know, but for now, let's just say I soldered this frog point in place. After posting a pic of this online, Thomas recommended that I add some more PC board ties between the switches to add a little more strength. Next, I added what will be the easiest bit of rail in the whole ladder, the stock rail for the straight route for this lead switch. At this point, I just soldered in the ends. Once I get the switch point rails in place, I'll go back and solder the rest of this rail. Speaking of which, now I'm going to add the switch points. This may be what I'm most nervous about at this point. I've got a few stock rails I manufactured several months ago. Back before I decided to build all this ladder in one piece, I prepped a bunch of rail to build several number 5 switches. Marking the position for the wing on the straight point switch rail, I cut and filed a notch on the base to bend this wing into the rail. After shaping the curve in the diverging route switch point rail, I marked and bent this wing as well. Then I soldered them in place. Now I was able to move back to the straight stock rail that I installed before and finish up soldering it in place as well. The position of these rails, where to mark the wing in them, feels a little tricky to me. The rails need to line up well to avoid derailment, and well, getting the angles just right takes some fiddling. I'm done with this switch point for now. I will install the other stock rail towards the end of the build, as well as soldering the switch points to the throw bar. I added the next frog point. An issue I ran into was the position of the stock rail for the diverging route on the second switch. I'd previously soldered it in place. It wasn't quite engaged with the rail from the frog point. It wasn't obeying the frog, so I had to reflow the solder and position it to get it engaged. I need to figure out the order I should solder these rails. But for now, I went ahead and installed the second set of switch points. Again, I had to do a bit of fiddling to get these right. However, I realized that the frog will get much more reliable once I get my guardrails installed. I moved on to the next frog point. And here's what I worked out for the order of operations. First, I solder in the frog point. Second, I solder the long leg of the point to the first and second tie of the next switch down the line. Third, I spike down this rail at the end just to temporarily keep it in place. Fourth, I solder the stock rail to the diverging route and the section past the frog. Fifth, I shape and install the switch points. Sixth, I soldered the stock rail to the diverging route in the section before the frog. Then, I repeat the process. Next is the final frog point for the right-hand switches in this ladder. It's going to be a little bit easier to make than the previous one. It leads into a left-hand switch at the bottom of the yard, so its long leg isn't quite as long as the previous ones. Also, the notch for the switch points is on the end of this long leg, further away from the frog point, so it should be a little bit easier to file too. Other than that, more or less, I followed the same procedure as above. I feel like I'm done with the hardest part of this build, but I may be fooling myself. I have just one more frog point to build, and of course a couple more switch points. The long leg of this frog is straight, and it extends all the way up to the top of the ladder. I'll actually have to build it in two pieces since it's more than 36 inches long, but this first piece should be pretty easy to do. I also need to solder the points to the throw bars. And I'll need to add the guardrails. So that's what I'll be working on next time. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and those links are below, along with a list of the tools, supplies, and resources I use. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave me a like. It's the easiest way you can support my channel. Subscribing is always appreciated too. If you'd like to support me further, you can find a link to my Amazon wish list below too. Thanks for watching, and please join me again next time as I continue modeling the White River Line.